Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to Tony the Technician's channel, and today we're going to be installing my drive shaft into my 3rd Gen Camaro. So this is going to be a fairly quick video, but before we get it installed, I do want to kind of explain my situation and help you guys understand what this process was like. So with the 3rd Gen, I first got it. It was a 2.8 liter V6 with a T5 transmission. Well, when I started this build, I was either going to go T56 or 700 R4. I actually ended up getting a killer deal on a built turbo 350, so I went with that. I had already installed my torque arm and cross member though, which was designed for the T56 or 700 R4. So I had to get an adapter for my trans mount, which was no big deal. Little did I know at the time that it was going to cause an issue with my drive shaft. So I also have a new rear end, the Hawks 8.8. Well, not only my situation had a few things. So obviously I needed a longer drive shaft, and so I was gonna get the Hawks heavy duty drive shaft. It's a 3-inch drive shaft, and then I realized that my stock drive shaft, I had it in for transport. It was just slipped into the transmission. It wasn't attached at the rear end. Obviously it wasn't long enough. My issue was that the U-joint actually made contact with the mount where the torque arm comes up and then bolts to the trans cross member. I'll post up a picture so you guys can see. So there's that basically mount that goes straight up and down, and the torque arm bolts to the top, and the bottom is bolted to the trans cross member. The U-joint was actually smacking above that bolt, and so my original thought was, when I called Hawks about the drive shaft, is that the only thing I could think to really get around this situation, because I didn't want to drop $550 on a new trans cross member and torque arm, was to actually get the measurements needed for the drive shaft, have the drive shaft cut a couple inches shorter than what it would normally be cut at, and then just add a inch or two longer slip yoke onto it, and that would just make the U-joint at the transmission side sit a little bit further back, which in my mind, you know, and a couple others that I spoke to, thought that would work just fine. But I sent the pictures over to Hawks, and they actually suggested there's 2 bolt holes where the torque arm can mount to the trans cross member, and I had it in the top hole. But they actually suggested moving it to the bottom hole, making sure that I can still achieve my pinion angle that I needed to, and then cut off the top ear of that mount to make clearance for that U-joint because it's barely hitting. I was like, okay. So I did that. Cut the mount, put it back on, slid my old drive shaft in, and voila, we had clearance. Then I realized that the stock drive shaft is 2.5 inches, and the one that I'm getting is 3 inches. So I'm like, even now that I've made clearance, I'm getting a bigger drive shaft. So the likeliness of it having clearance then is very unlikely. And since I'm ordering this online, I didn't want to deal with getting the drive shaft and having fitment issues and either having to send the drive shaft back or buy the $500 trans cross member. It was a big issue. Something very simple, but it was pretty hectic just for a drive shaft. So I decided to actually look up a reputable drive shaft shop here in town, and I went with them. They have a lot of great reviews. So I went with a 2.5-inch drive shaft, but I had it built to where it can handle 400, 500 horse just fine, and which is what my car is going to be sitting around until we get the supercharger put on it, which will probably be 2 years down the road. Not a big hurry. So I figured I'd go this route, and then after I had this drive shaft built, I realized could have probably went with the 3-inch drive shaft. It's not the drive shaft that's hitting the mount, it's the U-joint. So as long as I wouldn't have went with a heavier duty or bigger U-joint, I would have been just fine. Not a big deal. I'm still happy with what I have. If I need to upgrade when we start creating more power, then I will. But for now, this is going to be plenty good. So I'll show you what we got here, and then we'll quickly get it installed. Hopefully I didn't bore you guys too much. I just wanted you guys to kind of understand the situation that I was in. And ordering one online, there was too much of a risk, especially because it was going to be $550 before shipping, basically, or around $550, where this is built, and I know 90% sure, haven't installed it yet, so I don't know, 90% sure that this thing is going to fit without problems, and even if there is a problem, he's 20 minutes away. It's a lot easier than sending it back. Plus, it was $250 cheaper. Couldn't go wrong. So at least if there ever is an issue, I know the guy, a really good guy, so he can take care of me and any issues that I have with this drive shaft. So let's go ahead and take a look at it real quick, and then we'll get it installed. So obviously you can tell the bottom one is going to be the stock drive shaft from before, and the one above is the new one. So if you guys know, the Camaro used the GM 3R U-joints, which are they're very close to a 1330 U-joint, but my rear end, the Hawks 8.8, is actually a 1350. So when I ordered my rear end, they sent me the 447 from Moog, which is a conversion U-joint, which goes from 1350 for the rear end to a 3R for the drive shaft. Well, I'm not going with the stock drive shaft, so I was like, well, if I'm having a drive shaft built, I might as well just put a full 1350 U-joint in the rear. So that's what we have over here on the new one, is a new 1350 U-joint. And then up front, he said I could, bring him my old U-joint and it would save me, $40, $60, something like that. And I almost went with the billet one, but I figure I'm going to wait until I do upgrade to the bigger drive shaft when I really need it, and then I may do the billet one. But for now, just went with a new 27 spline slip joint or slip yoke, and then we kept with the same size up front because I didn't want to risk going to a 1350, which has a larger diameter than what is up front. So we kept the same up front. He said the U-joint itself is still good for up to 650, or the slip yoke and U-joint is still good up to 650. The drive shaft is only good for between 400 and 500 horsepower. But either way, it's stronger than what I have. We have better U-joints. They are non-greasable. The pros to getting a non-greasable is that with the grease fittings, you actually create a weak point in the U-joint. So if you're doing any hard launches or anything like that, it is a common failure for the U-joints to split at those grease junctions. So not only, as long as you go with a good quality non-greasable U-joint, they are better in certain terms. I mean, obviously you can't re-grease them, but they usually do last longer than a non-greasable one. They hold the grease in better than a standard greasable one, because the greasable ones are designed to relieve the pressure of excess grease out of the caps. So we're not getting into all that, but I decided, and the drive shaft shop decided, that the best route would be to go with the non-greasable, and it is a good Spicer brand, so it's a good brand, and I think for what I need, this is going to be perfect, and it's going to be a simple install. They did paint it yesterday and it was still tacky, so I just let it dry overnight. So we're going to go ahead and get it put in and see how it fits. So here's the tail shaft. There's that mount that I kind of cut the ear off of. Put a towel up in here so my drive shaft doesn't get beat up, or the drive shaft loop doesn't get beat up or anything like that. So we're gonna go ahead and slide it in and check it out. Okay, so we're fully seated into the transmission, and the drive shaft is a couple inches forward from the rear end, exactly like how it should be. You want it all the way in, and then it should back out about an inch or so when you get it installed onto the rear end. Now all we need to do here, all I've done was remove my U-joint straps here, and most people will just suggest snugging these up. You don't want to over torque them, because you take the chance of actually crushing the cap on your U-joint. So any torque specs you do find will be anywhere from like 10 foot-pounds to 30 foot-pounds, depending on the size. But once again, most people will snug it up. But if you guys are installing your drive shaft, just make sure to do your research. If you're going to snug it up, that's fine. That's your choice. Or you can look it up. It's all going to depend on the fastener size here for your straps and everything. So just figure out what they recommend if you're not going to just snug them up. But in our case, I just had to lift the tires off the ground so I could turn the rear end, because I couldn't access the fasteners. Mine are 14 millimeter fasteners, so now I'll just lift it up and there, she's fully seated. Now you'll take your straps, place them in, and then you'll go in and you'll torque those to spec, or tighten them to your preference,
And now we'll go ahead and see what we have for clearance or movement on the slip yoke. So here you can see the amount that the slip yoke has been pulled out of the transmission, and I'd say that's about 1.5 inches, which is about perfect. So I'm happy with the fitment, and it seems like we have clearance and everything. So that is it for the install of the drive shaft on the 3rd Gen Camaro. Very little left to do, so I'm just gonna go ahead and check all my fasteners down here, make sure everything's tight, and adjust my parking brake cables a little bit more, and then we're just one step closer to getting this thing fired up. If you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure to hit that thumbs up, leave a comment down below of your guys' thoughts, and if you guys have any questions or anything like that. And as always, if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. See you guys next time.